Don't know if you've ever given your child something to do and like a chore and they only did it part way. Never. And I know, us adults have never done that either. Like maybe you were asked to take the garbage out to the curb since it's trash day and you took the garbage outside, but it never made it to the road. Well, I took it out. Yeah, didn't do that. Well, I guess that kind of happens in our lives, and that's really what's kind of gone on in Jacob's life, or Israel, as he's now named. He only partway obeyed, and today's passage really leads to tragic circumstances because of his partial obedience, because he didn't do what God wanted him to do. So these tragic circumstances unfold, and we see this happen. The interesting thing is God is still in the midst of all that's going on. He didn't cause it. He didn't make it happen. God is not the source of evil. God doesn't cause bad things to happen, even though bad things happen to good people. We live in a fallen, sinful world, and they happen. As tragic as these circumstances are, and some circumstances we bring on ourselves, we cause them ourselves. Some, they just happen. Quote, natural disasters. Storms, we've seen a lot of those recent years. Hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. Anybody have water in their basement? Okay. But God is seeking to use these circumstances to move Jacob to a closer walk with him, to be the leader of his people, because that covenant is starting to come to fruition. Abram had Isaac. He gives him the covenant about the land, the place where they're going to live. So yeah, great. But then he also promised he'd be a great nation. It's like he has one son with Sarah. He had other children, but they weren't part of the covenant. So then Isaac. Isaac is Jacob and Esau, the twins. And they decided to give God a helping hand, just like Abram and Sarah did. And there's problems there because there wasn't complete and whole obedience. Then Jacob, he comes along and he deceives his brother for the birthright, the blessing. And so this goes on, and he leaves, runs away because he can't stay around home because Esau wants to kill him. And then he, works 20 years for his uncle who's crooked, deceiving, ends up with 2 wives and he only wanted 1. He ends up with a great deal of flocks, sheep, goats, camels, donkeys, He has all that, but then he's told to go back to the promised land. He's told to go to Bethel. So he leaves with his whole clan of people, and he meets Esau. He reconciles with his brother, but he's not sure what's going to happen. So what does he do? He divides everybody up, and then he sends his family out, the lesser wives or his maidservants of his wives whom he had children with, because there was the birth wars. I mean, all this is going on, and it's not part of what God intended. But in the midst of all these circumstances, good can come. So Jacob then lies to his brother, has no intention to go to his home with him, and he settles in the area of Seir, near Shechem, the city of Shechem. Now, there's a person named Shechem in our passage today who is a principal character in that, so don't confuse the two. So Shechem lived in Shechem. So it's great to have a town named after you. So I don't know if we have anybody named Emlenton or something, but we can check into that, I guess. But anyhow, these tragic and it's awful what goes on. You get to see the dark side of human nature in our passage today. It's Genesis 34, 1 through 31. And it's because of the evil that exists in the world, the sin, Jacob's partial obedience. Keep that in mind. If Jacob had just obeyed, none of this would have happened. But even in the midst of it, God is still working. His grace is still coming through to move Jacob to answer the call that he has for them. So keep in mind in your own life, is God trying to get your attention through circumstances that are going on in your life? Is he nudging you? This is almost like a 2x4, what's going on today. But take a look at your own life. So we get to see, first of all, in our passage here. Okay, oops, went too far. We both did it. Okay. It says, this is now Dinah, the only daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father, Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter, Dinah. But his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they heard of it, and the men were indignant and were very angry because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing must not be done. So what we have is Dinah's raped. Jacob's only daughter at this point is brutally raped. First of all, she was really rebelling because the women did not leave the tents, the area around the tents. Because she was going out to be with the women of the area, she was kind of like a rebel going outside, like hanging out with the bad boys kind of thing, So was she asking for it? No. Was she wrong in what she was doing? Yes. Because she was supposed to stay amongst the tents with her kinfolk. That was the norm of the time. And for her to do that was kind of outside propriety, you might say. And just to do that was kind of like, ooh, that could turn heads just by going out to be with these women who were of Shechem. So also the language that's used when Shechem decides to take her and rape her, it's brutal. The words that are used aren't just this, oh, there's a consensual relationship. No. He took her and he brutally raped her. He humiliated her. But then in a sick way, he falls in love with her. He spoke tenderly to her, and then he wants her as his wife. He's a sick person. He's a very sick person. He's one that obviously doesn't know Jesus, doesn't follow the same God. But this goes on. So this happens. Now, keep in mind, Dinah is not back at home. Dinah is in Shechem. Okay? She is not returned home and then there's all this uproar. But it's known that this happened. Jacob hears of it. And then we have the family response. What does Jacob do? Nothing. I'm sorry, I have 3 daughters. I would want to do something, and it probably wouldn't be a pleasant thing. Not that it would be right, because we're going to find out what these guys did was really wrong. But the anger, you see no evidence that Jacob was bothered. Why is that? This is one of Leah's children. He really had no love for Leah as his wife because he loved Rachel. And of course, we'll see that later in the story of Joseph and Benjamin, in the care that he has and concern he has for them and their safety and what happens to them. But all the other children, they're just extras. They can watch the flocks, you know. So that goes on. And Dinah wasn't important to Jacob. So there's no response from Jacob here. But now the brothers hear this, and what are they? They're indignant. They're beside themselves. They want blood. They want blood. They want to avenge their sister. They want to avenge their sister. Why? Because that was done in Israel. You see, the brothers understood the wider significance as well as the personal significance of this. That this outsider from another nation does this to an Israelite. So in other words, this is a battle in their minds, and it's against all of them. It's not just against Jacob. It's not just against Dinah. It's not just against the children of Leah. All of us. So they, in their minds, something has to be done. And so they start to think, how can we do this? We are disgraced by this act, that he would come in and do this. She was foolish to go out like she did. But it was wrong. It was wrong. So then we get to our next passage, which adds to this. There's just so much about this that we might not pick up some of the details in an initial reading, but you just kind of go, wow. But Hamor spoke with them. This is the father of Shechem. He is the leader, or quote, the king of the area, since Shechem was the prince. The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it and get property in it. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house, so Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, these men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us to become one people. When every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. I mean, just the lengths that they go to here are remarkable. You hear stories occasionally of stuff like this that goes on in wars. But this wasn't a war. This was just an act. So you have a marriage that's being arranged. You have the pagan proposal that's brought. I don't know if you noticed that Hamor, when he spoke to Jacob, did not mention the rape. Said nothing. He also did not mention that Dinah was in Shechem. He neglected those two little details. There's no shame in what happened in their eyes. His son wants this woman, so he's going to go get her with whatever it takes. And so he offers this. They left that out. The interesting thing is that you can live in our land, you can dwell in it, you can buy and trade, you can do things. God already told Jacob that. That was already promised. This is totally unnecessary. There was no need. But yet, Jacob is sitting there mutely about the whole thing. Dinah's brothers have come in from the field. They heard about it. And now they're present. And they're the ones to speak. And they have this plan. So what are they going to do? Well, it says they answered deceitfully. We cannot intermarry with you because your men are not circumcised. What was circumcision? It was the mark of the covenant, really. It was the mark of the covenant. It signified what Israel stood for. The covenant that God had with them, the promise that he had with them. It was the outward sign that they had, that all men would be circumcised as children. So all these men needed to be circumcised. Abram did this with his whole household when God told him to do this. So it started with Jacob's grandpa. And it's been carrying on for a couple generations now. So they do this. It has great spiritual significance to them in their relationship with God. But what do? They make a mockery of it. Because you know what? There's no interest in proselytizing these people from Shechem. They just wanted blood. So they trample all over that covenant by what their plan is. So they say, you need to be circumcised, and then we can trade and we can become one nation. They never intended that, which becomes very obvious as it proceeds and goes on. So they use it as a means to commit genocide. And that's really all it was. Let's commit genocide, because obviously the women had no standing. The men were what determined what a nation was, not the women. So women were just taken in and absorbed into other nations. So then they obtained consent. They obtained consent with what is going on. So Shechem, of course, named the bride price. Name it. I want this woman for my wife. I have to have her for my wife. So this is the terms. So he goes and has it done right away. And then they convince everyone at the city gate, which is, of course, where all their big meetings happen, at the city gate. It's where business is discussed. And they did this, and they convinced all the leaders that all the males should be circumcised. So they go ahead with it. And their motivation is not, to become one nation. It's they got a lot of flocks. They'll be ours, and we can take their women. That's really all they had in mind, too. So do you see something in common today with a lot of nations and how they act? The best interests of people are not taken into consideration. There's no consideration for what God wants in their lives. So they get circumcised. And they're especially sore after 2 days. So this is when it's very difficult for them to do anything. And that's when Simeon and Levi go into action. 2 men. They go in and they slaughter all the men of the city. Now there were 4 full brothers of Dinah. Reuben and Judah were also brothers, but they didn't do anything until afterwards, which is interesting as you look at Reuben and Judah later on as it deals with Joseph. Reuben's the one who tries to convince him not to kill him, but rather sell him. But rather keep him in the pit, and he was going to let him out. And then they sell him in the meantime as a slave. So all this goes on. And again, this is only because of partial obedience. All this starts to happen. Would evil things still happen? Yes, there would. These evil things probably wouldn't have happened. So Simeon and Levi go in and they destroy the city of Shechem. Basically, they slaughter every male, child. They kill them all. Now, the law of the time was, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, okay? So the crime was against this daughter of Israel. There is an equal thing taken to a daughter of Shechem, if that law is followed. But I think they went way beyond that, don't you? Way, way beyond that. They took it in their own way to mete out judgment. They didn't seek God. They didn't walk in obedience at all. And they committed this horrific crime. Now, interestingly enough, the two that carried this out, Simeon and Levi, when the 12 tribes come into the promised land and they conquer it with Joshua, what are the two sons or tribes that don't have land? An area. Simeon and Levi. They're mixed in. Simeon with Judah, Levi with all the tribes. They had roles to play, but they didn't have that part of it. They forfeited by what they did here. So again, this continues to go on. They lied to them. So they go on to do this, and the older brothers, the other brothers, not the older brothers, the other brothers, they came in and they plundered the town. They plundered the town after their other brothers have killed everyone. So it's not enough just to kill everyone, we got to steal from them too. So they go ahead and do that. So they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with a sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in their houses they captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Shall he treat our sister like a prostitute?" It is fascinating how this goes on. Here's Jacob responding to what has happened. He's angry, rightfully so. But what is his concern? You've made me a stink to these people. Still no concern over Dinah, is there? They rescued their daughter, their sister, his daughter, and nothing. What is his problem? He has this lack of care for his one daughter. She apparently was quite attractive, which is why Shechem wanted her. But it goes on. He didn't condemn the rape or the massacre, just the fact that he was now a stink to the inhabitants by what they did. And that they could come and they could overrun him. Now, where is Jacob's faith in God? The covenant that God made with him. It's out the window. It's gone. It doesn't exist. And all this happens from almost obedience. Obedience, kind of. As we kind of examine our own lives, as we look at our own lives, I just want us to think about that. Do we just partially obey God? Do we just get the trash out of the house, but not all the way to the curb? Do we just do token means of developing a relationship with God, or do we really seek and develop a relationship with God? Do we obey what he wants us to do completely? Do we comply with that? And it's not because we have to, because that's the parent-child thing. Yeah, you have to do that. So the kid whines and they're dying as they take the trash out, and it's not that way with God. It should be a desire we have that he can give us if we only ask him. But again, like I said before, God is working on Jacob. And God is working on each and every one of us. Because we can all think of times where we have dropped the ball. We have not walked in complete obedience to him. But God's grace is there for us. As we confess, as we strive to live for him, as we give up and become dependent on him. And that's what Jacob wasn't doing. That's what Jacob's sons weren't doing. It wasn't, let's talk to God and figure out what he wants us to do here. Because this was wrong. They were indignant for the right reason. In your anger, do not sin. They sinned. Big time. Where are we at in our walk with Christ when things happen? I just trust that we can individually make the decision. We talked about anger in Sunday school a little bit. You become angry. Do you just respond? Words you shouldn't say? Things you shouldn't do? Or do you take a moment, talk to God, and see what he wants you to do? Ask him to work on your heart. How do we act? I should add in, do we type things we shouldn't type? Social media is such a dangerous place, especially for that. So consider that today, to walk in complete obedience to God. You will keep yourselves from some of these things that happen to us, because some of them are brought on because we don't obey. We can clearly see that in Jacob's life. So it might not be so clear in our own lives. But you will see that some things don't happen, and that's God's grace. We're protected from some things. We may never understand or totally know what those things were. But God is gracious to us. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you just continue to speak to all our hearts today. Lord, that we can walk in complete and unfettered obedience to you. Lord, remove those obstacles in our lives, really those idols that keep us. Jacob won his reputation to be good amongst those people there. He liked that area, so he thought it was a good place, but God told him to do something different, and he didn't listen. Lord, help us to listen. Help us to not act rashly like the brothers did, but to seek your wisdom and your guidance in all things. And again, to walk in obedience to you. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. You are dismissed.